The weapon in the Marine Corps when I enlisted was the Springfield '03 rifle, the basic fundamental weapon of every Marine was a Springfield rifle, single shot. The Garand M1 rifle was a brand new rifle in that days, and on the first day of January 1943 was the day that the Marine Corps abandoned the Springfield and took on the Garand as the issue rifle. And of course, the old-timers in the Marine Corps said, the Corps will never be the same. There's no rifle like the Springfield '03. But the M1 was a very fine rifle, and it was the rifle at which I shot on the rifle range for record.
Cat-F. Welcome to World War II Live. I am your host, Dr. John C. McManus, alongside, of course, as always, my sidekick and buddy, Kevin Hymel.
John, I am the Nixon to your Eisenhower.
Nixon to Eisenhower. Wow.
I think I've exhausted all my Nixon references now. You're safe.
Yeah. And I guess no H.R. Haldeman references coming in.
No, you're clean there.
Okay, good. We're clean there. And, of course, alongside, as always, our incredibly sagacious Chief of Staff, the 11-time Emmy Award-winning producer, Mark Festoso.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And birthday boy.
Oh, yeah. It's my
birthday.
birthday.
As we record today, it's Mark's birthday.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's awesome. Hey, guys, we got some really fun questions for Stump the Chumps coming up. And if you remember from a previous episode in Stump the Chumps, they stumped you with the North Platte Canteen.
Nope. I don't know what you're talking about. Nope. Me. Don't know what you're talking about, Mark.
Which was
we know awesome. Everything.
Yeah. So I have to say, I just got intrigued, right? Because there's all these crazy stories from World War II. I did a little digging.
Don't tell me you flew out to North Platte, Nebraska.
Almost, but we do live in the digital age, Kevin. Wake up now, you don't have to fly there. And here's the deal. You might know I also work for PBS. I love PBS. I've been a producer. PBS did an entire documentary about the North Platte Canteen, and it was pretty cool. So, in our description, I'm going to put a link to that documentary because what did they do? They interviewed people from the North Platte Canteen, which was incredible.
I'm starting to smell a rat. I think you implanted that question, Mark.
I did not.
I
didn't know about
years ago.
Yes.
I think you got an Emmy for that documentary, Mark.
He probably did. Probably got 3, and he doesn't even know.
That's right. That's my secret World War II fetish, the North Platte Canteen. It's a great feel-good story about the heartland of America. So maybe we'll do something about that later. But
we'll do a whole episode on it in the future.
Yeah.
But tonight we're talking about weapons, and we had William Twigger, who opened up our show talking about the difference between the Springfield and the Garand.
Yeah, that was interesting. So, infantry weapons, and of course the ultimate infantry weapon is the rifle. And in World War II, of course, the armed forces were transitioning from the Springfield to the M1 Garand. And, of course, many, as Mr. Twigger had said, this is William Twigger. I think he was an F Company, 2nd Battalion, 29th Marine, 6th Marine Division, which puts him in the Battle of Okinawa, so later in the war. But it shows, it's kind of interesting, even a guy who comes in later in the war is still influenced by the Springfield, which Marines were using, earlier in the war in the Battle of Guadalcanal and a little bit thereafter. But, so you can see the attachment to what had been a successful rifle, right?
But see, John, you say transforming or transferring. To me, the Garand was like a revolution. Because before that, you've got these single-shot bolt-action rifles. So it's bang, bang, whereas with the M1, the Garand, you're going bang, 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 8 bullets in a row. And this is going to change tactics all over the globe for the U.S. Army. The Germans, their basic rifle is the Mauser, that same bolt action. And you're going to get things like marching fire, where instead of standing around picking targets, you're going to have whole platoons and companies advancing while just pouring fire on the enemy and closing with them. And that was impossible without the Garand.
Yeah, I mean, the Garand is obviously the game changer, and the entire way that the U.S. Armed Forces fight is fire and maneuver. And so you've got one element laying down that cover fire, a semi-automatic fire. So just in case you're not familiar with the M1 Garand, it basically had an 8-round clip, and it had what's often called like a stripper clip. So it was a breech-loaded weapon. It had the 830-06 caliber bullets.
What does breech mean, John?
So that's just right above the trigger assembly,
right?
Rather than the muzzle, So so it would just load there, but instead of below and clicking it up in front of the trigger assembly, something like that, it loaded from above, and it had this little predilection where the bolt might slam forward. If you didn't get your thumb out of there, it could get hurt pretty bad, and it was called M1 thumb. But if you were trained properly, you would be basically trained to kind of salute your weapon, to push that clip down there with your thumb and get it out of there. But also, if you clean the weapon properly, it was unlikely to have the bolt slam forward. So then you would fire those 8 bullets, semi-automatic, as fast as you could pull the trigger, not like lean on the trigger and full rock and roll or that kind of thing. But
right.
Fire the 8 distinct bullets, and then they would fly out of the breech, and then the stripper clip would come out with this little ping noise.
And that's the difference between a semi-automatic and an automatic. Automatic, you hold the trigger down. Semi-automatic, you're bang, 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 bang. And the M1 thumb, to me, when I think M1 thumb, because of pop culture, I think of Barry Pepper with the sniper Springfield rifle in Saving Private Ryan. That first scene when they get off the beach off of Dog Green, and they're penetrating a little deeper, and he's saying prayers as he fires. The M1 thumb is really prominent on him, and ironically, he's not firing an M1. So I'm assuming that when they were training the actors in all different kind of weapons, he probably got M1 thumb. And John, have you ever gotten M1 thumb?
I never have, fortunately. It's been close.
Okay.
Close, but I've never gotten it. But I've always wondered about that with Barry Pepper. Whether that was an accident, or but you would think they could cover that up with makeup somehow or something. But yeah, be that as it may, the oddity is this is an expert rifleman, an incredible crack shot. He would not be a good candidate to get M1 thumb. And yes, like you said, oh, by the way, he fires a Springfield. So it's odd. And the Springfield, as Kevin said, was the older weapon, and it was a bolt action. It had a 5-round clip, and it packed a wallop. And so it's used as a sniper rifle in World War II, as is portrayed in the movie. And it's a little more common, I think, than maybe we had previously thought. But yeah, the reason the M1 Garand is really important is that you're fighting against two armies that have a very good light machine gun. And I only call it a light machine gun because I don't have to carry it. But the MG 34 and 32 for the Germans.
Yeah. I've carried one of those things. The MG 42 is not light.
Oh my God.
Yes, it's totally worth that. But when you hold one, my God, that thing's heavy.
Absolutely, and the Nambu too isn't exactly light either. But for well-trained young soldiers, you could maneuver that thing around, and that was a lot of firepower at the squad level. So the equalizer we had certainly was the M1 Garand. That let's say we've got a squad of 12, you probably have 10 guys carrying the M1 Garand, and that's a decent amount of firepower. And the clips are easy to carry in a bandolier or in your cartridge belt, even in your pockets maybe. But the other thing, you'd have the Browning automatic rifle. And that's more akin, So the BAR, that's a 20-round box clip from below, and that can be fired on the full automatic as well. So it's a heavy weapon. It's 20 pounds, and maybe a little bit less than that with the box clip. But that would be kind of your answer to that mobile machine gun firepower that your enemy has, in addition, of course, to the M1 Garand.
And I would say that the enemy machine gun is semi-mobile because you really are firing it mostly with a tripod or a bipod, whereas a BAR, you're running, jumping with that thing. It's really not limiting your ability to maneuver. I just want to jump back to the M1 real quick. I taught the M1 at Leavenworth for a little while. We would bring in ROTC instructors, and we would have them come down. We had a whole rifle range, and you started off with flintlocks. And, each stage was a more modern rifle, and it ended with me with the M1. And even though I, took the training and everything, I was really worried about loading clips. And I used to spend for a whole week, I sat at my desk loading and unloading clips.
I've done that.
And when the guys came up, you'd say like, okay, fire 4 shots with it, and everybody wanted to get to the point where we'd go ping. That's what everybody wanted. That where the magazine is popping out or the stripper clip is popping out. And I got to say, at the very end of this whole thing, a soldier from the 82nd Airborne came up to me, and he's like, "Can I just fire it?" Like everybody's starting to leave, and I said, "Sure." He goes down on one knee. I put in a whole fresh clip, and he just bang, 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 bang. I mean, it was almost like the thing was on semi-automatic, just like holding it. I've never seen somebody fire a semi-automatic rifle so fast, and it just showed me like what a well-trained soldier can do with an M1. And then, of course, the other element of it is you put a bayonet on the other end, which you can't do with a snub-nosed machine gun or anything like that. So you really can engage with the enemy. But I digress, John. We had moved on to the BAR.
Yeah. So the BAR, I mean, like you said, you're not going to put that on a firm platform of some kind. Most of the BAR gunners didn't like to have that bipod on the front of it, mainly because it tended to snag on things. And so what you're talking about is a weapon that they're going to fire from the shoulder, and boy, what a kick, from the hip, or maybe just rest it on something very, very commonly, and man, does that pack a wallop, the BAR.
And John, are we looking at with BARs? Are we looking at one per platoon, one per squad, one every 7 men, one every... What is the? Do you know? I don't.
It depends on when we're talking about in the war.
Okay.
At the beginning of the war, the typical arrangement was 1 BAR per squad. And of course, especially if you're talking about, like, say, the Marines on Guadalcanal, I mean, your platoon is largely armed with Springfield rifles. So those are bolt action. So you need as many BAR as you can get, much less maybe some Thompson submachine guns or, any other kind of automatic fire. But later in the war, once they realized, how effective the BAR truly was, you're going to have sometimes 2 per squad, sometimes 3, when they would really front load it. So they get as many as they can. But the problem with the BAR is keeping it supplied with ammo, because, man, that thing was an ammo hog.
Because you're going through ammo like nobody's business.
Yeah, and it's heavy, and of course the BAR man has to carry has to have a different cartridge belt, so you have to have a dedicated cartridge belt to carry it. You can't really carry that ammo in bandoliers quite as much as you could the M1 Garand. You could carry it in a knapsack or something like that, but so you can imagine you've got other guys dedicated to maybe carrying the ammo for it. And that was...
I was about to ask you about that, because you can't, if a guy gets wounded, you can't take his ammo. He's got M1 ammo. And John, is it the same bullet as a M1 Garand?
It is. It's just it's in a 20-round box clip, so it's different than the M1 Garand in that respect, and can be fired automatically. But so the arguments that went on in squads all the time is who's going to have to carry the BAR, and because it's heavy. It's
not something people volunteer for; they're voluntold to do it. And I've seen those cases where the new guys come into the unit, and the sergeant gathers them up, and he looks for the big guy and says, "You're a BAR man now."
Quite often, and when talking about this, I do think films are instructive. I think Saving Private Ryan really got this right. We were talking earlier.
Some films are very instructive.
What is?
I would say some films are very instructive, because there's others where, like, the Dirty Dozen, and they all have grease guns, M3s, and it's like, no.
Okay, but I meant good films. Yes, exactly. Let me step back. Dirty Dozen is not a bad movie. It's just
I love that movie
for the weaponry, But yeah, Saving Private Ryan. What they really got right is the attitude, the personality of a proper and good BAR man, played by Edward Burns, Private Ryben. So yes, he's a pretty sizable guy and can carry the BAR around, but he's sort of cocksure, isn't he? I mean, he's confident in himself. He's a kind of glib New Yorker. And I think the BAR guy had to have that kind of personality of saying, yeah, it sort of rests on me, and I'm big, I can carry this thing, and I know they're going to be counting on me, and I have to have that confidence. I think that's what they're...
Are you saying that to have a BAR, you had to be from New York?
No, I'm saying that you had to have some level of strength and maybe some level of confidence.
All right.
But I'm saying, in his case, yes, he's a wisecracking, glib New Yorker.
Yeah.
You could be
I was kidding, John.
But you're so literal-minded,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, but no, I really do think they got that right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
The only
what
thing I would question is Tom Hanks with the Thompson, because that's not really an infantry weapon. And it was, those things were like bars of gold. Everybody did want one, but there were a lot of people that were critical of it because it took 45 ammunition, so it didn't have that heavy impact of a modern semi-automatic or automatic rifle or assault rifle. Because I kind of think that was the first American assault rifle, even though it was pistol ammunition.
No, it's a submachine gun, and I mean, the 45 caliber bullet was a wallop. I mean, that thing had stopping power, and I think that was dead on too, because the Thompson was a status weapon.
Right.
So if you were the captain, you could have the Thompson submachine gun. If you were the first sergeant, like Sean Penn in The Thin Red Line, you could have a Thompson submachine gun. By the way, that novel, which I've recommended many times, The Thin Red Line, it has this really interesting kind of plot line around who is going to get the Thompsons in the company, and there's like 4 or 5 of them.
Uh-huh.
If I'm the captain of a company, I've got first dibs. So, I mean, of course, Tom Hanks's character as Captain Miller would have dibs, especially in a ranger unit, in an assault unit, where you're going to be maybe in some close combat, because the Thompson really was meant for close combat. It was not that good at distance. So it tended to be in wider use in the Pacific, where you might have more close bunker-to-bunker, jungle-to-jungle kind of combat, cave-to-cave.
Right.
But the way
you want to sweep an area.
Yeah, and the way they showed in Private Ryan, though, I think is pretty well done. I mean, it's the way he's using it, the kind of combat that they tend to be in as Rangers. Yeah, that certainly makes some sense rather than an M1 carbine.
John, I got a question for you. When we talked about this, when we mentioned this topic, I've been wanting to ask you about this. It just doesn't make sense to me. So at the turn of the century, we were using Krag Jorgensen rifles, right? And, the fighting in Cuba, the Spanish could target us because they were using smokeless rifles, and ours would produce a puff of smoke. That was 1889, And so in 1940 to 45, we still have not gotten our minds around smokeless ammunition and M1 Garands, and I don't know about carbines. Are they all putting out smoke, and why?
Mostly, and I've always wondered the same thing, and I have tried to chase this down. Others who know a lot more about weaponry, I'm sure, could tell you. I honestly don't know, because you hear soldiers complaining about it during the war constantly, and they usually claim that their enemies had smokeless powder. That wasn't always true.
Okay,
but it sure seemed like it to them. So we had I think a lot of black gunpowder, and so that tended to produce smoke. I think it also, though, it tended to be a bit more reliable in the elements, that gunpowder, and it tended to have a better projectile. Just simply a better way to fight. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of wondered the same thing.
Yeah. And John, then my next one, tracer rounds. I know about those with machine guns. And a lot of the guys said that once you became a veteran on the battlefield with one, you started taking them out because you would have one every 10 or something like that. You didn't want everyone to be a tracer because you didn't want the enemy to trace them back to you. Were the rifles also tracers? I know in Future Wars they were.
Typically they weren't, but you could load them as such. And so if you're going to be in night combat, something like that, maybe you'd have some, a few tracer rounds here or there. But for your typical M1 Garand clip, no. And, the interesting thing about the M1 Garand, too, the other thing that I want to circle back to, you were talking earlier about the distinctive ping.
Yes.
So sometimes enemy troops.
I know what you're going to say. I love this story. Go on.
Yeah, they would wait for the ping sound, and then they would open fire because, okay, the Americans are reloading. So sometimes the Americans would sort of adjust to that and say, all right, like you and I are, say, fighting the Germans in a town in Sicily or something, and we would basically bait and switch them where. It would seem like you're out of ammo, but I'm ready for when they come up and shoot you.
Right. I'd let mine ping, because they're going to pop up to try to shoot me, and you're going to be able to knock them out.
Yeah,
I'm glad you told it like that, because I'd read somewhere we would throw the clip down on the ground so the enemy would think, and I'm like, there's a difference between the ping and the thing hitting the ground, so that makes much more sense when you say two guys are kind of playing off each other.
Yeah, it makes that very distinctive sound. Ping! I mean, really, like a very quick second, and anybody would know to hear it. But, the other thing, too, speaking of mythology, things like that, of course, there's SLA Marshall's ratio of fire. She claimed that only 15 to 25% of American riflemen ever fired their weapons in combat. That is such a bunch of nonsense. It is so demonstrably false. And let me give you a little scenario. The 7th Infantry Regiment was fighting a battle that was in the Mediterranean theater. I think it was in Sicily. And the volume of fire was so heavy for this unit, a couple of companies, the 7th, that are fighting against the Italians and the Germans there, so heavy that when the stripper clips were ejecting from the M1 Garand, the pings, there were so many of them, it sounded like a xylophone playing. I mean, just think about that a second.
Yep.
Then, I'm going to give you another example. The 77th...
real quick, I'm going to jump in and go, where did all the ammo go? If they
exactly.
were firing it, are like archaeologists finding warehouses full of ammo? Like, dang, we found 7 warehouses in Anzio. They never fired a shot.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, to your point, this is exactly what I was going to say. So I thought about that, and I thought, let's get at this from the supply angle, from the logistical angle, because if you don't have people firing, you're going to have a hell of a backlog of bullets, right?
Yeah.
The 77th Division I found in like 10 plus days of fighting on Guam. And this was, fighting, but not like ultimate combat kind of thing. They went through so many bullets that, it was like an average. The way I figured this out, I'm paraphrasing. It was like an average of 2 to 3 clips per day for each one of us riflemen. It's a heck of a lot of bullets. So that meant there's a lot of people firing their weapons out there somewhere.
So I have a theory about this. You've read About Face, right, John?
Oh, yeah.
Hackworth book about Vietnam, really Korean Vietnam. And he meets with SLA Marshall, and they get to be kind of buds. And Marshall basically admits to him, hey, I'm writing this last book because I want to retire. Like, it really has become a financial thing to him. And there's part of me that wonders, like, geez, people aren't buying my stuff. What do I do? I'll make some kind of crazy, outrageous claim that'll be a game changer, and people will start reading my stuff. And, his personal memoir, like, the guy's getting drunk every other day. It seems like everybody's meeting for drinks. Now I realize it's a different generation. But that's my interpretation. Like, he just pulled something out of the sky and said, here's this unbelievable thing. Everyone pay attention to me.
He did that.
I think you did in one of your books, John.
I do it in all my books. But no, he did. And you. I learned from you. But
I made up the whole Patton diary thing, so yeah.
Well, clearly. It's your syntax, totally.
Yeah,
but
sure.
no, he did pull it out of thin air, but in a different way than you're saying. So he makes the original contention in his 1947 book, Men Against Fire. So this was like out of World War II, and he had great credibility in a way because he had pioneered combat interviews. And so I want to defend Marshall in the sense that he did some amazing work.
Yes, he did.
Combat interviews, and he was a
good writer.
Good writer, and I think he spoke for the infantrymen as well, or better than anybody I can think of. Mm-hmm. But where he went wrong was trying to make this contention about people not firing their weapons as if he had done some sort of systematic kind of sociological analysis. And when you actually look at his papers, there's no evidence of that. And actually, I interviewed. Yeah, I know. I interviewed John Westover, who was one of the other combat historians who work with him. And I asked him, "Did you guys ever ask the people who are interviewing this question?" He said, "No. It would have been a really kind of hostile question, like, do you beat your wife or something?
Have you stopped beating your wife yet?"
Yeah, exactly. So what they were after, the combat historians, were what happened in the small unit engagements, like piece by piece and all that. And it's brilliant work. Mm-hmm. But no, they weren't systematically gathering this info. And so where I think it comes from is, of course, there were some people who were reluctant to fire their rifles, didn't want to kill, were frightened, frozen up. Of course, that happens. It's the problem is putting a percentage on that that was so stark. And then, of course, to your point, Kevin, later in life, Marshall started to kind of change the percentages. He went to Korea, and all of a sudden now it's magically 50%. And then in Vietnam, with Hackworth, it's up over 60-some-odd% or something like that. So, so it was really kind of nonsense from the start. And I think it's unfortunate because it paints the wrong picture of American infantrymen, in my view.
And it takes decades to kind of correct that record. People get that stuff so set in their heads. Ambrose wrote about the the Sten gun, but the British were using, and that it would always jam all the time. And Marty Morgan said, no, that's not true. They used a double bullet magazine and it would jam. When you use a single stick, it's fine. And he said he even told Ambrose this, but to Ambrose it was more dramatic. There's this problem, and I think we love that sort of, the soldiers were up against everything, including the bureaucracy behind them that was not giving them the best equipment, and yet they soldiered on. And, things like the M1 are just, thorough, rugged, you could beat it up and it's still going to fire. I remember Ernie Pyle, one of my favorite pieces by him was about this unit that would bring all these muddy, dirty rifles to them in the field, and they would sit around with all these empty helmets around them, and they would disassemble all these M1 rifles and throw all the parts into helmets, then have lunch, then reassemble rifles for the rest of the day from the parts. And one of the things, because what he was so good at, he would tell you about technical stuff and then make it personal. And they said, like, a 82nd Airborne paratrooper came in with a horse and said, I'll trade you the horse for a gun. And they're like, we can't do that, sir. And they said the real tragic one was some guy had taken the stock of his rifle and cut a hole and put his girlfriend's picture and a piece of plexiglass over it. And they had to give it to some other soldier, but a solid, effective weapon, and, leave it to Ernie Pyle to make it human.
Yep. He's talking about the ordnance units that did that. And we've, believe it or not, reached the end of our time for this discussion. I guess that
we have?
We have. And the last,
there's something I'm not tracking, obviously.
There's a lot of things you're not tracking. We know that.
So if we've come to the end, that means we're coming to the beginning of something else, John, right?
This episode of Stump the Chumps is sponsored by WarfareHistoryNetwork.com, the online home of WWII History Magazine and other fine military history publications from Sovereign Media. WWII History Magazine features in-depth articles on all aspects of World War II, and each is lavishly illustrated with historic photos, maps, combat art, and more. Visit www.warfarehistorynetwork.com to find all the WWII history articles published over the last 25 years, plus just as many articles covering the whole history of armed conflict. Begin your digital subscription to access all the articles on the website, or sign up to receive a subscription to the print edition, or both. WarfareHistoryNetwork.com will take you to the front lines.
So, John, you're a chump.
Well, I'm a chump. You and I have that in common.
Yeah.
So,
all right, guys. We got
first question queued up.
We have 3 questions about the North Platte Canteen tonight.
Hey, John. I'm out of here. See you guys next week.
All right. So before we get started, hey, everyone out there, we want to answer your questions. So, John, how do people tell us?
Yes,
or send us their questions?
Please email us at worldwar2live@gmail.com. It's worldwar2live@gmail.com, and the 2 is a numeral 2. Please send us any kind of question you can imagine, especially about the North Platte Canteen. The more about that, the better.
No, please don't send us any questions on the North Platte Canteen.
Oh, come on.
For the love of God.
Yeah, there's a sense of adventure.
That's right.
We're going to do a live show from the North Platte Canteen.
We're going to make that one of our PBS pledge premiums, right? Like you get a tote bag with North Platte Canteen on it. It's great. It's awesome. All right. So first question, it's actually apropos. You guys were talking about Barry Pepper, the fact that his thumb had M1 thumb and they didn't hide it and so forth. Jim wants to know, in your opinion, what was the most realistic World War II movie ever made?
Wow, that's quite a question.
That's a big one. We're going to lose a lot of viewers on this one.
I can go first, and you guys might criticize me for it, but I really think the best years of our lives.
That's a great point.
It has, it really takes place after World War II, but it captures the World War II experience, the adjustment coming home. It's so human. And I think it comes out before the MPAA ratings. So you've got things like infidelity and alcoholism, being addressed head on. and injured a guy with no arms coming back from the war. The government really didn't want to highlight that kind of stuff. There was a documentary made about psychological wards where they treated psychologically injured soldiers, and the government put the lid on it because they said, "Hey, we're preparing for future wars. We can't have people knowing that this could result." And so I think it was a bold, daring movie for its time. I think it's still effective today. Yeah, but we can talk more movies too, John. What do you got for? What's your category?
I agree. That one is amazing. I mean, this is 1946 for gosh sakes, and you talk about a really honest movie about adjustments, about veterans adjusting to the post-war period. I don't know that there's ever been a movie made that's so honest and to the point about any war in any era, even in later era when we really start to address such issues more, or think we do. If we're talking about, depictions of combat, I do think it's hard to get past Saving Private Ryan on some levels. Now, there's plenty of things that are inaccurate in the movie, most of which are not that incredibly significant, like
that the average viewer would not know.
I mean, like the in the beach scenes, the log obstacles are pointed in the wrong direction.
The Tiger tanks in the American zone, and our British friends get very upset that the coxswain of the landing craft is American when it would have been British, and I think they would have been landing craft assault, right? With the metal doors.
Yeah, if they were British, they would have been landing craft assault or LCAs. And you're right, bringing in C Company, the 2nd Ranger Battalion, that's probably British crew. But beyond that, I think that the fire and maneuver tactics, the depiction of Normandy and the Normandy terrain, the Normandy climate. There's a scene where they transition from the patrol, where they're having that conversation about whether to go and get Ryan and whether it's worth it and all that. And then they transition and all of a sudden it's raining. And you've experienced this many times too, I know. You're in Normandy and all of a sudden here comes rain. Just like...
Here comes the wind and the rain, yeah.
Yeah, and then 10 minutes later it's gone, and everything's dripping wet, and then the sunlight is coming through, and like the Norman architecture is so dead on. I mean, that part is so well done.
The scene that I remember, like, I don't know about you, John. I brought my fiance to see it, and she's freaking out next to me, and I'm sitting there like, okay, that's the correct rifle, and those are the correct shoulder patches. But the one part where I was like, oh. Was they were coming up just on the shoreline. Tom Hanks has that moment of the battle kind of overwhelming him with the silence, and then coming back. And at one point, they're among the obstacles, and a carbine rifle kind of almost flies up in the air because of so many bullets. And that was like, there's no place safe. And so many people came to me. It was amazing. I was working at World War II magazine at the time, and people were calling me and wanted to get together and talk about it. And they're like, I think I would have hung head behind those obstacles too. And I'm like, that's what Spielberg wanted you to feel. That this is so terrifying. The only way to survive is to move forward. That doesn't make any sense in your mind when you're on that beach. It's like, where the hell are the assault boats? Let me climb back on one. I want to get out of here. And the only way to get off the beach is to go forward. And
it says that. And it's so well done because like every inch of this beach is pre-sighted, and that is just 100% true. Yep. And then the depiction even of the fish being killed, they're killed by ordnance too.
And a lot of people don't even realize that that's Ryan. They zoom in on that guy's back, and it says Ryan. And I've had to point that out to people, like, no way.
It's because there's so much coming at you. It's easy to miss things. But the other thing you mentioned about, Captain Miller kind of being out of it or whatever, well, this is another element of accuracy. So what had happened, he's concussed, and he has something called acoustic trauma. So my wife is an audiologist and very, very familiar with this, and she said that is absolutely a thing where you basically kind of, you're disoriented and you lose your hearing. You've kind of lost your inner ear balance, and that's portrayed a couple times in the movie.
Yeah, and at least twice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so certainly that could lead to someone becoming a concussion casualty, but obviously permanent hearing loss and all that too. It's I just think that little things like that are really well done.
I'm just to mention two other movies real quick. I think Fury is good visually, to see the tanks maneuvering, and when they first come into camp and you see all the mud and you see all the guys gathered in the camp. The plot, but the visual I enjoyed. And then, John, is it Battleground, the 1950s?
Battleground.
Yeah, the 1950s movie.
1949.
It was 49. I thought it made it into 50. But anyways, they actually took extras. They took 101st Airborne vets and put them in a lot of scenes. I think the forests, I was like, that is not the Ardennes. The trees were a lot thicker in the movie. They tended, like, there was another movie, A Midnight Clear. They filmed it in Canada. And for as much as I enjoyed it, I'm like, I can't. Having been to Ardennes Forest several times, I'm like, that's just not how it looked.
Good, though. It's still so good, though.
So those are some other movies that I've enjoyed. Battleground, it was funny. I saw it with my father about 3 years ago. Really just sat down to watch it because I had seen it as a kid. Oh, Ricardo Montalban, But, to sit down with everything I know now and watch it, I'm like, I was so ready to be critical. And I was like, dang. Yeah. They really nailed it,
For the time period, it's amazing. And
I think it still holds up today. I really do.
I think we could do a whole episode on this topic.
Yeah,
for sure.
Red line is
saying, let's move on, guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Battleground because that's the one I wanted to.
There you go.
It's good.
I think people don't know about it as much, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. That was great, and I definitely vote we do, episode on this or something. There's so much.
Nah, then we're not doing any pop culture stuff. No way.
All right. Now here's one. Okay, this is from Fidelis. We got this from Discord. It says, I have a relative that served alongside the Big Red One in the attached 745th Tank Battalion.
Okay.
I've been doing, in quotes, amateur research into the unit's history to learn more about what he experienced. When researching a topic or a unit, where do you start? What is your method for sifting through mountains of history out there to put together a historical narrative?
Google.
They're the secrets of your professional life here. Yeah.
So I usually any topic I'll probably Google it and look for books, and then go to Amazon or Library of Congress as my starting point. And then I am very spoiled because I live in the Washington, D.C. area. So I will then go to the National Archives and pull records. And I think people think when you pull a record at the archives, it's like all these firsthand accounts that are really exciting. You can find those. But when you're looking up a unit, it's really the not always operations, usually the operation journal. And it's very like at 0600 we did this. And sometimes you're looking at radio communiques, and it's really just like MIA, not MIA, what's it? WIA, Wounded in Action, which I don't know is really used anymore. Or DOW, Died of Wounds. But it's with the archives, library, you just go look at books and it's great. With the archives, you need to know what you're looking for. You can't go in there and say, hey, I want to learn about tanks. You have to know the unit and things like that. And they've got incredibly professional and great people there that can walk you through and get you to those records. And I like to use the photo archive too, because sometimes you can glean stuff from the photos that aren't in the records. The Battle of Mayenne with the 90th Infantry Division, they take this bridge at Mayenne, but when I went and found the photos, I found a photo of them unfolding an American flag, and they said that the villagers had kept that from World War I and hid it, and unfurled it once the Americans came through, and that wasn't in any records, and so that added a really cool dimension. I don't know, John, have you ever researched a unit? What do you think?
No, hardly at all.
How many books have you written on World War II, damn it?
A few. And cool stuff about the 7th Infantry Regiment and all that.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, so really the National Archives is the lodestone for unit records. I mean, that's really where you're going to go. And, of course, there's the journals, like you said, Kevin, but there's also after-action reports, there's critiques, there's medal citations that are in the general orders. So sometimes if you're interested in an individual being decorated, you can find that in there.
Real quick, since you said that, there was a lieutenant colonel or a retired colonel that went through all these Army records and collected all the silver stars. And it wasn't complete, but you would always just ask for the red folder, when you go to the archives, and they would have the list. Sorry, I just remembered that.
Yeah, usually, though, like in any typical unit, that info is in general orders, almost just kind of randomly in there.
Yeah.
The Medal of Honor stuff is separately under Army Command, in World War II at least. So you kind of go through all of that material, and some units were better than others in terms of...
It's all depending on who's the record keeper and,
It does, but one thing that's different then versus now is all of them were required to report, their experience to the adjutant general. So in other words, they had to compile histories and move that material on, whereas that isn't the case now. It was very haphazard now. Back then, there was this commitment to record keeping. So for World War II, yeah. So if you're researching a regimental or division-sized unit, you can access some pretty good stuff. Battalion is a little dicier, like the 745th. I mean, I've researched that unit in relation to their experiences on D-Day, and you can find some because it's such a famous thing, D-Day. But if it's what's happening with them, later at the, in Germany or something, it could be a little bit hit or miss.
And then the other thing, you can do this at the World War II Museum website and the Library of Congress because everything's so digitized now. And even the Pacific War Museum and the Holocaust Museum, oral history interviews. And you can sometimes type in a unit and it'll find you a guy who was interviewed from that unit. And I find those really alive and helpful and human, and explain so much that's not going to be in the records and enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's what you need. That's what you need. You need to meld the unit records with the human story that these guys can tell you in an individual, interview, but also then the Army Heritage and Education Center at Carlisle, which is a lot of that material, personal papers, and then also they had this massive project to gather questionnaires from World War II veterans, from veterans of every war from the Spanish War forward, by the way, but World War II, and again, you can check by unit. A lot of those are actually digitized. So
they're digitized now.
A lot of them are, yeah.
And the surveys?
The surveys, yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, it's usually worth an on-site visit if you're doing any kind of unit research, because that is the soldier story there. So you meld it all together. There are some units that were combat interviewed in 1944 and 45 in the European theater, and you can find those at the National Archives as well. And so, it's really just a matter of kind of nosing in there and just finding anything you possibly can in these various repositories.
Yeah. Mark, how do we do on that question?
You did good. I had a question, though, on that. I had a relative who was trying to find out about his dad, I believe, who was at the Bridget Remagen.
Okay.
Right.
9th Armored Division. Yeah.
Right. He talked about there was an archive, I think it was in St. Louis, John, that there was a fire or a flood. The personnel records,
National Personnel Records
gone,
Center.
Right?
It's the National Personnel Records Center, and it's part of the National Archives. The facility did have a fire in 1973 that destroyed a lot of the Army records from the World War II and Korean War era. Some of those have been rehabbed. Some have been lost, of course, but that's the individual personnel record. So, let's say if we were in the service at that time, it'd be like my own personnel file, or Kevin's, or Mark's, or whatever. There's also what are called morning reports from whatever unit you were part of, usually a company-sized unit, and those are on microfilm. Those weren't destroyed.
And John, I'm just going to add, I've had this experience where people come to me and say, hey, I contacted St. Louis. They said my dad's records were destroyed in the fire. And then I hand them off to a personal contract researcher, and the guy finds their records. Yep. That's just the way that it happens. So don't give up. If the government tells you, get yourself a contractor. We should have one on the show at some point because we both know a very good one, and I don't know if we should be giving his name out right now, but we'll check with him first. But it would be great to have him on because I'm sure he could explain a lot of details. So I think we get an A+ now because Mark added that piece on.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. Well, the fact that you gave people hope who maybe thought. No,
but there's a fire. I've heard about that fire so many times. I'm like, it's not a dead end, but it's a perfect excuse for one.
It can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, final question. Speaking about the government.
Okay. The government.
Nancy wants to know.
I don't trust her already. Go on. With a name like Nancy? Come on.
How many presidents served in World War II who tried and failed to become president, and how many World War II veterans became senators or representatives?
Oh, my goodness.
The very last one, I think all of them.
I mean, if this is Congress in the 50s, 60s, 70s?
Yeah. Imagine a guy who didn't serve running up against a guy who did serve. The guy who didn't serve I mean, Adlai Stevenson, I don't think served and got walloped by Eisenhower twice, right?
But Adlai was a little older. But yeah, I mean, of course, Eisenhower waxed him.
All right, so Roosevelt and Truman served because they were both commander in chief. Let's see. Then Eisenhower.
We're talking in the military in World War II.
Okay, well, I don't know if they were. Oh, you got an inside scoop with Nancy, obviously.
That's the question. So we'd
start with Eisenhower, right?
Everything from Eisenhower to Bush, pretty much. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, John F. Kennedy in the Pacific, a lot of Pacific. Kennedy, Nixon, Ford, and Ford doesn't get a lot of credit for. He was on an aircraft carrier, the Monterey, I want to say, and he was like in charge of exercise and whatnot. And the Monterey gets caught up in that typhoon, and he saved some lives in there. He really downplayed that. Yeah, and there was a book that came out, and they interviewed him, and the guys who interviewed couldn't believe all the stuff he did in World War II. And he was like a football player at University of Michigan. He was a stud.
And a really good one, too.
Yeah.
Johnson, too, served in the Pacific as a young naval officer.
He got that medal for being calm on an airplane during an attack. I love that.
Exactly.
Kennedy was very legit. In fact, about people who didn't run or whatever, Kennedy, he gets his PT boat split in half in the Solomon Islands. And so his father goes to his older brother, who everybody thinks is eventually going to be president one day, Joe Jr., and he says, look what your brother did. You need to do something big like that. And so he becomes part of what's called Operation Aphrodite, which is attacking U-boat pens and large cannons on the coast. And what the idea is, you pack a bomber full of explosives and just put a pilot and a co-pilot. You rip off the roof of the cockpit, and you put radio controls in it, and they take the plane up, aim it at the target, and as they fly towards the target, they jump out, parachute out, and a pilot in another plane radio controls it in. And so Joe Jr. and another guy take it up, and boom, it blows up. And that changes American history because the young party boy, rebellious brother is now going to become the president of the United States.
Yep,
so real history game changer.
Yeah, I should revise my answer on that. Carter was not a World War II veteran, but he was a Navy veteran right after.
Well, he was in Annapolis during the war, so I guess he's in training, so technically he's not.
So technically he's not, I guess, a World War II veteran. Reagan technically was, but I think he was in the Army Air Forces, but obviously spent the war in Hollywood working on films and that kind of thing. But, since Bush, of course, we haven't had any, I guess, right?
Yeah, Nixon was a supply officer, I guess, in the Navy.
Bougainville. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Kennedy, Johnson. Yeah, so at Arlington National Cemetery, to be buried there for one of the categories, you have to have had at least 1 day serving in the military. And there was a guy who went through boot camp, airborne school, ranger school, and died accidentally in ranger school. And they were preparing the funeral here, and we were like, you can't bury him because he never had a single day on active duty. He was always in training. So, yeah, you're right, Carter wouldn't qualify. Trying to think of some people who ran, World War II veterans who ran and didn't make office.
Bob Dole lost.
He'd probably be the last person to run and lose.
George Bush actually lost to Bill Clinton in 1990.
Okay, good
Although
point.
He had been president, but he didn't get reelected. Oh, Thompson ran and lost. Nixon the first time.
George Wallace was in B-29s over the Pacific.
George McGovern was a B-24 pilot in the 15th Air Force in Italy.
Yeah. Let's see. Who else? Johnson. Who did Johnson run against?
Johnson ran against Barry Goldwater, who was an Air Force veteran.
Yeah. I thought Barry Goldwater was a Korean War veteran. Or was he both?
I think he's both, but I couldn't swear to that. I'm not sure. But he's
and then
a long time.
I hate to say this when I think of Congress. The first person that jumps in my head is frickin' Joe McCarthy, who was a Marine in the Pacific, who I think he had the record for firing the most ammo from a plane, and he shot down a whole bunch of trees on the ground. And I remember reading a first-hand account by somebody who said that they bumped a pilot or whatever, a machine gunner for him, and how disgusted they all were with McCarthy, that he was just doing it for politics to get his name in the newspapers back home, and nobody respected him.
Yeah. because he was an intel officer, so it was not within his line of duty to go on missions. Though he did go on.
What kind of hell did you give him today, boys? That was his big quote.
Yeah, exactly. But he was a Marine. He was a legit Marine. But yeah, I mean, of course, in Congress, oh gosh, there are dozens and dozens of them, and one who
just like the Civil War. When the Civil War ends, almost all of Congress is former, Federal Army or even Confederate Army guys.
Or eventually Confederate Army restored and redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Power.
I don't know how many German and Japanese. Who was it? Danny Akaka.
Is named after them. What?
Danny Akaka, a senator from Ohio. He was playing baseball on Hawaii when the Japanese flew over and bombed Pearl Harbor. He joins the Army, I want to say with the 25th Infantry Division, becomes an engineer, goes off to Tinian to help build airstrips and whatnot, and his buddy wakes him up one night and says, hey, we got to watch this plane take off. So they watch it take off. He goes, all right, we got to watch the plane land. Plane came back and landed with the Enola Gay. So he witnesses the beginning and the end of the Pacific War. That's pretty amazing.
That's cool. Another guy who witnessed the Pearl Harbor attack and was sort of caught up in it in terms of picking up wounded people and the dead is Daniel Inouye, who was all of 17, I think, at that time. And, of course, eventually ends up in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, gets the Medal of Honor, and was a longtime senator from Hawaii.
John, wasn't he going to throw a hand grenade and they shot his arm off and he had to take his dead hand and pull the grenade out? And war isn't as fun as we think sometimes,
Not much fun when it's like that. Yeah, the airport in Honolulu is named after him.
Deservedly so.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, that was great. I just want to throw one last thing in what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Congress becomes populated by veterans of the Civil War and World War II. But one thing you didn't mention is World War I, right? I did a documentary in the Lost Battalion, Charles Whittlesey.
Yeah.
And after the war, right, all the World War I veterans take over Congress, and they're critical in setting up the GI Bill. Because when they came back from World War I, they had no help. And they said, we're not going to let our sons have that. So really, the World War II, the help all these veterans get was because of the World War I veterans.
Well, I think it was the World War I veterans and the bonus marchers who got forced out of D.C. when the Senate voted it down and snuck out a back door like a bunch of cowards, and this bonus army of homeless guys basically marches across the country and they're greeted as heroes. People are coming out into the streets. Hey, these are the guys that fought the war. And there was no greed involved because back in the United States during World War I, all the factory workers were getting bonuses to make war material, while the guys getting killed on the front aren't getting any kind of bonus. So Congress votes for it, and I think they voted for it for 1945. But then the Depression hits, and they go, whoa, we need it now. And it was a great celebrated march across the country, and the House passed it. I want to say somebody was dying. They brought him in on a stretcher to vote for it in the House, and gets to the Senate. And so MacArthur rides into the rescue.
Oh, yeah.
Crushing everyone. All right, so what are you guys up to these days?
John, what you up to, John?
So I was going to mention to you guys kind of an interesting series on Netflix that I've watched. I think it's called Hunting
Andor?
Hunting Osama bin Laden or something like that.
The Hunt for bin Laden?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Really interesting, and it's got a lot of interviews with the intel people.
Uh-huh.
And this whole odyssey, and of course the 10-year odyssey of chasing this guy down and ultimately, killing him. I just think it's a 3-part series, and I know that, Kevin, I know in particular you've been interested in the intel side of this too, and I think you'd find it pretty interesting.
Yep. Well, I spent 3 years working at Fort Leavenworth on the Afghan study team, studying small unit tactics and battles in Afghanistan. So, yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. So what you up to?
I was waiting for you to ask me that. More importantly, it's what I'm not up to. And I'm really excited about this, John, because Sunday at 11:40, I submitted my manuscript for the volume 3 of Patton's War. It is off my desk. At this point, I don't care if it sucks because I don't have to worry about it. For the first time in I don't know how many decades I've been working on this thing. And, I submitted it 3 weeks ago to my publisher, Andrew Davison. And I really rushed it. I mean, my life has just been chaos. I've been making a movie, working a full-time job, trying to finish this book. And, the first volume was, 340 pages. The second volume was 360. And this one's 512. So it's the big push to get it out. So I submitted about 3 weeks ago, and I sat down to look at it after I sent it out. I'm like, oh, my God, this book sucks, and it's boring. And so I said, I just need another week. And that week turned into 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks. But I finally got it out. And I've got a whole bunch of other stuff I'm up to I can talk about. But that's the biggie. So everybody listening, stop asking me when Volume 3 is coming out. It's at least been submitted to the publisher.
I'm glad you said you don't care if it sucks, because I hate to break it.
I don't care if it's like a McManus book, damn it. It's just done, okay?
It's never be that level, obviously. But no, it's part of my American Military Experience series at the University of Missouri Press. And in all honesty, I've begun digging into it, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, except you called Eichelberger William Eichelberger, so I had to take issue with you for that. But
I thought I called him William Frankenfooter, but okay, yeah.
I hope you've changed that as to Robert Eichelberger.
Okay, yeah. So I've got your text.
I'm going to have his get after you, but no, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I shouldn't ask you this, John, but what page you on?
Oh, I think like 145, something like that.
Okay, oh, you're almost done.
Yeah, getting close. Like you said, it's really brief. There's hardly anything to cover in 1920. Right?
Yeah, so this goes from January 1st, 1945 to December, I think, 22nd, 1945. So the end of the war, 1945, all the way to his death. And the last chapter is really kind of just before the conclusion. The last chapter, I really just kind of sum up the months between the war ending and his death, because there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. But I just, that would be a whole other volume, and I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, you got to end somewhere, right? You got to let it go at some point. But yeah, for those who don't know, this is the third of 3 volumes that Kevin has written about Patton in World War II. So, love to give him a hard time, but
yep.
No,
and started in 2004. That's when the idea was given to me by a long-haired hippie friend of mine named John McManus. And I said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Everything about Patton has been done, which is the stupidest thing I've ever said. Well, I'm sure I've said dumber.
Wow,
but that's the wonder of history is no, there is not a definitive ending book on it. I mean, there's books coming out on George Washington, Robert E. Lee, Grant, still finding new stuff. And I predict people will find more stuff on Patton, but this is the best I could do for now.
And then the other wonder is that, you actually listened to me for a change. And look how it turned out.
Well, remember, I did cuss you out first and say what a stupid
You have many times, so
was.
to sort that out.
But I found that's very much a part of my personality. When someone gives me an idea, my reaction is, it's stupid, I've got enough to do, blah, blah, blah. And then I calm down and I think about what they said and like, okay, I'm kind of like Beadle Smith when they said, you really should give Hodges' first army to Montgomery. No way! I'm going to fire you for that idea. And then 20 minutes later, he goes, that's a pretty good idea. We'll do that.
Maybe we'll actually do that. Yep. Well, we've really covered a lot. We've, as usual, the North Platte Canteen. Of course, that's a given. We got to cover that. But talking about Kevin's book, we've been through some great questions tonight. We want more at worldwar2live@gmail.com. Again, it's worldwar2live@gmail.com, and the 2 is a numeral. So we've gone around on the M1 Garand and other infantry weapons. Who knows? Maybe we'll pick that up again.
There's so many more weapons to talk about. We just barely scraped the surface.
Yeah, literally, absolutely. Yeah. So, yes, gentlemen, I think we've done right by it this time again. So. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We really do appreciate it. It's fun to have you. So until next time, Roger out.